This only ever saw it once. That's how I knew it was a 109. And he strafed us.
Mm.
And it was Johnny, Mace's house skipper. He said, bail out, which we did.
My name is Kirk Bowett. I'm a limbless veteran and military survival instructor who specialises in training military aircrew in survival techniques. As a limbless veteran, I have the privilege of listening to hundreds of survivor stories from friends, colleagues who span right across the generations of the serving and veteran community. But these stories all have a few things in common. They all start out with our survivor in a situation where if they do nothing about it, they will surely end up dead. Their will to survive against all odds and their journey of recovery can take weeks, months, and even years. I've always been keen on listening to the stories of those that have gone before us, because history has a tendency of repeating itself. And as we move forward with change, development and technology, these valuable messages can be lost. At the Aircrew SERE Training Centre, we have a wall of honour, and on completion of our courses, students get to listen to a survivor's story. Following this, our guests get the opportunity to sign the wall and become the next chapter of inspiration for our future aviators. At 101 years old, Doug Wooldridge was unable to make his journey here to Cromwell to deliver his story to us at the ASTC. So I took my trusty video camera and travelled to his home in Croydon, South London, and listened to his amazing story of survival during his journey of World War II recovery.
I was at Croydon Aerodrome.
Doug Wooldridge spent the first half of the war working as an aviation engineer at RAF Croydon, now Croydon Airport Museum. Doug met Mary Hammond from Edinburgh, a Women's Auxiliary Air Force, or WAF, who was working at the station patching shot-up airframes. The two soon hit it off and fell madly in love, but Doug was missing out on all of the action, and in 1943 he applied for active duty and was posted as a flight engineer to 466 Squadron of the Royal Australian Air Force based at RAF Leconfield and operating the Halifax bomber.
We flew out of Leconfield, pilot, flight engineer, rear gunner, mid-upper gunner, bomb aimer.
By early 1944, the tide of the war had turned and the Allies were on the offensive. Daylight precision bombing raids over Germany had become the new tactic, with the aim of disabling the German military war machine. Doug and his 7-strong crew were about to embark on their 5th sortie over enemy territory. The next target was Frankfurt, a German military industrial hub. Daylight raids were perilous, and with the threat of German anti-aircraft and defensive fighters, the aircrew grew more and more wary as they approached their targets.
I had a life jacket, yeah. Well, we all had life jackets underneath our flying steer. This only ever saw it once. That's how I knew it was a 109. And he strafed us. And it was Johnny, Mace's house skipper. He said, bail out, which we did, because we knew we hadn't got a hope in hell.
As the Halifax approached its target, a Messerschmitt ME109 appeared out of the blue, strafing the fuselage of the bomber with its heavy machine guns.
The flight engineer, which I was, sat right behind the skipper. There was a steel, bulkhead between the pilot and me, and how somebody when you're told to go, you either got to go down deck, which is not easy to do when you're in a bit of a dive or something, or else you go out the back. So prior to that, my duty was to put the parachute on the skipper, because he couldn't fly with that parachute, you know. And I was putting it on him, and he told me to, in 9 words, certain ways, to sort off. So I went down the back. I couldn't. They were going downstairs because there's 3 down there, and so I went down the back. And before I got to the back, I got up to the mid-upper, and I could see that he was no longer part of the system. You know, he was dead. And I went past him and went out the back door. And I don't remember how it happened, but what I must have done is when I bailed out, I must have hit the rudder because this part here, when I was on the ground, was virtually gone. You know, well, it wasn't gone, but it was all in a terrible state. I must have hit the rudder because I remember when we were shot down, and I was bailed out, and it was a foot of snow. It was very, very cold, and I remember laying there one day, one hour, that I'd been injured. I'd had part of cannon shell through my knee, and apparently when I bailed out, I think I must have hit the rudder because I smashed all my mouth. I lost all my mouth teeth and everything. And I remember laying in the snow.
Doug landed in a heap in the icy snow. His jaw was smashed to pieces from kissing the tail boom on his way out. His leg was shot to bits. He lay in the snow and began to freeze. Using his chute as a makeshift duvet, Doug tried to keep warm, wrapping it around his body and underneath him. But the chute was white, and the German soldier initially couldn't find him in the snowy conditions. But Doug wanted to be found. With his life ebbing away and the cold bringing on hypothermia, his foe would be his only salvation.
He was home guard sort of thing, and he could see that I was injured, so he made out that he was going to get help. And off he went, and after a while he come back with about a dozen people in the door, and they were very, very gentle with me. And I mean, you weren't England and Germany. It was just everybody was doing their best for you, and they put me on the door and carried me into the where they sort of, they had a central fire in a barn sort of thing, it was to keep people warm. They could see that I was in dire trouble, so they did what they could for me. Couldn't have been more gentle than what they were, and went off somewhere and got somebody to come who had a bit of knowledge of what to do, and he came and you could see that I couldn't. I'd had cannon shells through my knee, and I had my face must have looked terrible because I'd lost all my teeth. I've never had teeth since, except false ones. And they went away. He went away, and they came back, and shortly after that, a lorry pulled up, and out jumped a German officer, and he came and to see what was what, and he saw the state that I was in, and I was no good. I was just a mortal person, and he did what he could for me. In fact, he was very kindly took off his jacket, or one of his jackets, and lifted my head and put it underneath, so I was more comfortable. And it was nuns, and when they could just couldn't do enough for me. They could see that I was in dire trouble, and I stayed there with these nuns for, I think, about 3 weeks. Eventually they took me to a hospital, and I couldn't wish for better treatment in the hospital.
Till he reached further medical help at Stalagluft 8, Holstein, on the Czechoslovakian border.
It's where all prisoners go to be interrogated, and I went there, and they knew. You go for an interview, and they knew more about me and what flight I was on than I knew myself. So they interviewed me, and there's nothing that I could tell them that they didn't know. And then they said that I would go to WW2, and I went there, and then eventually they said I was going to a prisoner of war camp, which was right up nearly into Russia, a place called Aircrew, and there I stayed for a while till they came and said that I was to go to where all the prisoners went. I forget all these names, and I went there, and then I met my navigator, which was bloody marvellous. And not only navigator, but the bomb aimer, Bill Bray, he was there. Different nationalities, but they weren't Americans. They were English and African, I think. I'm not quite sure. And I was told that I'd have to wait there until they decide where else to go. And then I went to this central place where they all seemed to go to.
There were Allied troops of all countries held there. Even army units from the British Expeditionary Force captured as early as the Dunkirk evacuations of May 1940.
There was army personnel as well who'd been taken right from the very beginning, and they had their huts or their little congregation, and RAF people, when you just knew, when you got there, you automatically went into the RAF part,
But over to the east, the Russian advance on Germany had gathered pace. Orders came for the camp to move, and the prisoners began a forced march west over hundreds of miles to central Germany.
We picked them up. There was when we were walking, we picked up different groups of POWs.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, we were all together, sort of thing, you know.
Marching by day and resting up on the side of the road at night, both prisoners and their German guards were in terrible condition. Hunger-stricken prisoners had developed dysentery, and Doug recalled them dashing off the side of the roads to relieve themselves, with fatal consequences.
We had to move. I don't know the reason why, but we had to move, and it was a long trip that we did, a long walk. That some people had terrible dysentery, and when we were marching, they were getting into such a state they used to rush off to the side to relieve themselves or do something, and then the Germans used to shoot them. Thought they were trying to escape, but they weren't. If you strayed or did anything that wasn't quite in order, they had no hesitation in finishing you off. Oh, I wouldn't like to guess. It must have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that were for the march. Well, you sort of got that. You got that impression that that things weren't quite. You know, I think they knew what was happening. I mean, they're no stupid. They hear the news and that sort of thing. So they would surmise these things. One morning there was a commotion. You know, if something happens and you all get to know. Somebody knows, someone, you know. And over the hill came this bloody great, and it was great, a tank, and it was the Durham Light Infantry. So they came over the hill, saw us, and they called up for assistance, and then up come two or three lorries and full of soldiers, and they all got out. They all gave us cigarettes and things, you know. It was and gave us whatever they had, which was good. If you go into the town, and they told us where the town was, and he said, where do you want to go? So we said, well, we want to go to fly home. So he said, I think you want, look, just go and sit over there, he said. And I went, and he said, you might have to wait a bit, but he told us where the nearest place was to get an aircraft to come home. So we said, where was that? And he told us how to get there. So when we got there, we nearly had a fit. There was hundreds and hundreds of army people, Air Force, all waiting on an aircraft to come home. And they asked that one Air Force man was to go in the aircraft with the army, because the day before, or the day or two before, it was full of army blokes, and the chap they hit an air pocket, you know, it bounced, and he grabbed the parachute that was in the wing in case it went in the sea.
Yeah.
Of course, the aircraft went straight in. But they knew that we were coming. They knew that we were safe, the family, and they didn't know anything else. And then when we knew when we were told we were flying from, you could, with a bit of luck, manage to get somebody to lend you a camera and lend you a phone to phone home, which I did. They didn't believe me when I first spoke. Said, you know, what was the idea of the joke? And I said, it's no bloody joke. And that I'll never forget my mum's face. Still, thank God, I survived.
As the years pass, the ranks of our World War II veterans begin to fade, but their legacy lives on. What they did and experienced underpins what we teach today, and the strength of human spirit that was alive then is as alive today within us.